Welcome back to C# for Beginners series. In this tutorial, I will discuss making decisions. I hope you have reviewed my earlier 3 tutorials, have installed C#, are able to compile and run applications, and understand variables, data types, and the assignment statement. The objective of this lesson are to learn about the if-else-if statement, getting input from the user, and the coding style. I want to make a statement about my teaching style. We are going to talk about programming constructs, and you need to know and follow the syntax, the grammar. I did not learn English or C# programming by learning grammar first, so I will attempt to teach programming by examples. You probably should refer to the recommended text for this class to learn the finer syntax rules which you will eventually need to understand. The if statement. If you want to selectively execute part of a program, one way to do that is to use the if statement. The if statement executes a block of code only if the specified expression is true. If the value is false, then the if block is skipped and execution continues with the rest of the program. You can either have a single statement or a block of code within an if statement. The conditional expression must always be a Boolean type or a bool type, must evaluate to either true or false. Some programming languages consider 0 as false and non-zero as true, not C#. C#'s Boolean type has no numeric equivalence. Okay, now let's look at this example. These are two distinct if statements. However, since one and only one can be true, we can write it using the else clause. Also, what happens if A and B both were the same? How would these two programs behave? For the program that we have written, the one that you saw on the previous slide, either A is greater than B or B is greater than A is what we are really considering. So a better way to write that would be by using an else statement. If A greater than B, then this is going to happen, else this is going to happen. If you noticed, this does not address what happens if A exactly equals B. What would be printed in this example? You may want to download this program from my website, try running it, and try to put A equals 5 and B equals 5 and see what the output you get from the program. Talking about the programming style, even though if you only have one statement following the if condition, you do not need to use braces. But I prefer using braces always. So in this case, if this is true, even though I have one line, I could have more lines. If I have more than one lines, the braces are definitely going to be required. Else, under the else also, I only have one line, but more lines could be added. So I prefer this programming style, which is called the block if statement. Here is a better solution to the problem that we are considering. If A greater than B, then do this. If that's not true, look at the second possibility. Is A exactly B? Then do this. If not, what is going to be the case? Otherwise, the B is going to be greater than A. So I believe this pretty much covers all the cases. Whenever you are writing an if statement, make sure that you have covered all the cases that you would possibly come across in your application. We saw the list of relational operators earlier. Now we know how to use them, typically within an if statement. Most of the program you saw so far looks something like that. We have a class program, we have the main method. This is where the main method begins, and this is where the main method ends, and this is where the class ends. And you notice that our programs are getting bigger. So in the following slides, I may try skipping the template part of it. I will only be showing you the code here. So if you want to try that code, you need to write some sort of a class called program, take the code, put it under there, and you will be able to test out that code. Now, what if you want to read inputs from the user? You want to be running your program based on some inputs provided by the user. This is the template for reading the information from the user. So before we read the information, we want to prompt the user. Say, enter your name, and whatever the user enters, we are going to read it using the read line. Whenever you have a string, you read it using the read line, and that's going to be assigned to the variable name. Next, we are going to ask the user to enter age. We are going to read that as a string, and in this case, since I'm expecting that to be an integer, I'm going to use the parse method for the integer class to parse that string to a number. So I got two inputs now, name as a string and age as an integer. And just to make sure I got the information right, I'm going to be printing that one out. When you run this program, this is what you're going to get. It's going to say enter name, you enter John Smith. It says enter age, you enter 31. After you enter that information, it prints the information that it read. Okay, so here is our if-else program in which we need A and B. In my previous example, I showed you that the A and B were actually fixed in the program, and to change them, you need to go back and change your program. Here, we have made the program or written the program such that A and B can be provided at runtime. So in this case, it's going to ask you to enter the first integer, A, enter the second integer, that should be B. You read A and B, and now based on the values that the user provided, you're going to be making a decision and entering and getting the result. It's going to be either A greater than B or B greater than A. If you provide A and B the same, well, then it's not going to print anything. Well, here is the first bug in your program. You will see many more of these. This is going to be the output of the program if you entered A as 7 and B as 5. So one way to make a decision is by using an if statement. Another way to make a decision is by using the switch statement. The switch statement is preferred whenever you can use it. However, the switch statement is limited. The switch statement can make a decision only on one number, only on one whole integer number. So in this case, we are going to ask the user to enter a number, hopefully between 1 and 12. We read the number as month, as an integer, and then we pass it on to the switch. So depending on the value, the number that the user entered for month, it is going to go through all of these cases. Is month 1, or is it 2, or is it 3? And depending on what the value of month is, it'll print or spell out the name of that month for you. If you entered anything other than 1 through 12, it is going to go under the default clause and say that the number that you entered is an invalid month number. One more thing about the switch statement. Now, which one would you prefer between a case and a switch? Case generally is simpler to read, and case is also faster, but the case statement, the switch case statement, is limited. A note about the coding style, especially the indentation practices. Indentation. You may have noticed that certain statements were indented in the examples that I showed you earlier. Even though C# compiler does not care where you place your statements relative to each other, indenting the code helps making the code more readable. It turns out that when programming, you will spend 90% of your time reading the code and only 10% of the time writing new code. So you should try to make your code readable, unless of course you are worried about your job security. Basically, you indent one level after each opening brace and go back one level after the closing brace. So that's the basic style that you should follow. In fact, for most part, if you're going to be using Visual Studio, it takes care of the indentation for you. But sometimes it doesn't do that if you have an error or a syntax error in your statement. Okay, so we learned about the if statement and the switch case statement for making decisions in your program. We also learned about how you read user input at the DOS prompt or the command prompt. Next, we will learn about the for loops and the do while loop. Thank you.